My brother slept with my fiancée, and my family defended them, acting as if I were the problem. My mother manipulated me into forgiving them. They preached that love is complicated and family must stick together above all else. But I walked away forever, letting karma handle the rest. My name is Arthur, a civil engineer by trade. My brother Leo, a year, my junior, was the artist, a label my mother Isabel had lovingly assigned him. While I spent my teenage summers on construction sites with my uncle, hands raw and back aching, earning money for college, Leo was exploring his sensitivity. This exploration typically involves smoking weed in the basement, attempting to be a YouTuber to an audience of zero, and composing angsty songs about a profound existential angst I could never quite grasp. The routine was always the same. I'd return home, covered in dust and grime. My mother would barely glance up from the stove. "Good, you're here. Dinner's almost ready." Then, her face beaming with pride, she'd carry a plate downstairs for, "Leo, my boy, you must eat. The muse doesn't wait." My father, Ricardo, a decent but weak-willed man, simply allowed it. His silence was his peace treaty, a way to sidestep my mother's emotional tempests. Only my older sister, Sophia, seemed to see it. Sometimes our eyes would meet across the dinner table, and I'd catch a flicker of pity and resignation. Tirelessly for a dream, and that dream had a name: Valeria, my fiancée. I wanted to build her a stable life, a home with foundations as solid as the structures I designed. I genuinely believed you constructed love the same way you built a building. With unwavering dedication, diligent effort, and premium materials, I was about to discover the human heart is the most treacherous foundation of all. Sundays at my parents' house were a ritual, a meticulously choreographed play with my mother directing. On one particular Sunday, I arrived with a fine bottle of wine and significant news: I'd been promoted to project manager. It was a monumental step, the culmination of years of sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends. "Congratulations, son," my dad said, offering a genuine pat on the back. Sophia hugged me tightly. "You deserve it more than anyone, little brother," she whispered. My mother's reaction was lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice, son. You're always such a hard worker," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. She immediately redirected. "Leonardo, come show us that new chord you learned. It's marvelous, so full of melancholy." And there was Leo, emerging from his basement lair with his guitar, radiating his tortured genius aura. He strummed 3 basic out-of-tune chords, and my mother applauded as if he were performing at Carnegie Hall. I just stood there, my promotion and my bottle of wine feeling utterly insignificant. Valeria arrived a few minutes later, it seemed. To follow her into any room? She was a primary school teacher, patient and sweet. I loved her with an intensity that sometimes frightened me. She was the sanctuary I returned to after a long day on the job. "My girl, so good to see you," my mother exclaimed, embracing her with an affection she never showed me. Leo was just about to grace us with his music. Valeria smiled and took a seat, but not beside me. She sat next to Leo. I noticed their knees were almost touching. I saw him give her a quick, nearly imperceptible wink, a private joke, in a language I didn't understand. "That song reminds me of that movie we saw the other day, remember?" Valeria said, looking at Leo. "Of course I remember," he replied with a sly grin. "The one by that Swedish director I told you about." My mother watched them, a strange look of satisfaction on her face. "You two have such a special connection," she said, beaming. "It's like you speak the same soul language, I sometimes think. You're soulmates." The word hung in the air, heavy and awkward. I saw my father shift in his seat. I saw Sophia look down at her plate. A cold spike pierced my chest, but I suppressed it. Paranoia, I told myself. Foolish jealousy. It was absurd. To doubt Valeria and my own brother? A few weeks later, I took her to the mountains, to the exact spot where we had our first meaningful date. I knelt down. "Valeria," I began, my voice trembling. "You are the bedrock of my world. Will you marry me?" For a long, terrifying second, a shadow of doubt flickered across her face. But then she smiled, a radiant smile that banished all my fears. "Yes," she cried. "Of course, Yes. I held her, feeling like the luckiest man on earth. I thought I was on top of the world, my future perfectly mapped out and secure. The irony is, I was kneeling on the edge of a cliff celebrating the construction of a future on ground that was already primed to explode. The day my world imploded was a Tuesday in April. I recall it with crystal clarity. It was a gray, overcast day, and the concrete delivery for the main tower's foundation was delayed by 24 hours. We were at a standstill. Got in still nothing to do, Arthur. My supervisor, Don Miguel, told me, "Take the afternoon off. See you tomorrow morning." Normally I would have stayed, catching up on paperwork. But a thought, which in hindsight felt like a cruel twist of fate, entered my mind. I'll surprise Valeria. She always complained that I worked too much, that I was never spontaneous. This was my chance. I drove home feeling unusually light. I turned onto our quiet street, a row of identical houses with manicured lawns. And then I saw it. My brother's beat-up old Jeep. A clunker my parents had bought him even after he'd wrecked 2 other cars, parked right in front of our house. A small alarm went off in my head, but I silenced it. He's probably on his lunch break, I told myself. Probably came by to borrow money or pitch Valeria one of his brilliant business ideas. I parked behind him and walked to the front door. It was slightly ajar. Strange Valeria was always so careful about locking it. From inside, I could hear soft music. I recognized it instantly. All of Me by John Legend. Our song, the song we danced to in the living room the night I proposed. "Valeria?" I called out. No answer. Then I saw the first piece of the puzzle from hell. Lying at the bottom of the stairs was one of Leo's old frayed band t-shirts. A few steps up, a sweater, the lavender cashmere sweater I'd bought Valeria for Christmas, the one she said was the softest thing she'd ever felt. You know that moment in a horror movie when everything goes silent and the main character knows something awful is about to happen? That was me. Time stretched thick as molasses. My heart started pounding a dull, heavy rhythm in my ears. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling like it weighed a ton. Her jeans, her blouse, a trail of clothes leading directly to our bedroom door. The door was closed, but not fully latched, a small crack of darkness. The music was louder now. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, trembling. Part of me wanted to turn and run, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But another darker, more primal part of me had to know the truth. I pushed the door open. I don't need to paint a graphic picture. Use your imagination. In our bed. The bed we'd picked out together. The bed where we'd planned our future, where we talked about how many kids we wanted. But the thing that truly shattered me, what broke me into a million pieces, wasn't just the act itself. It was that at first they didn't even notice I was there. They were in their own world, oblivious to my presence, my pain, my universe imploding. I just stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to breathe. Finally, Valeria's eyes fluttered, open. Her gaze met mine. Raw, pure panic flooded her face. She pulled the sheet up as if it could hide her deceit. Leo, my brother, my own blood, turned his head slowly. He looked at me, and with a casualness that chilled me to the bone, he uttered the words that would seal his fate in my mind forever. "Oops. Bummer, bro." He didn't say it with remorse. He said it like he'd spilled a beer on my rug, a minor inconvenience. Is in that single instant, every ounce of love I'd ever felt for either of them turned to ash. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch, though every primal fiber of my being howled for violence. I said nothing. I just turned around, pulled the bedroom door closed with a softness that surprised even me, and walked back down the stairs. The trail of clothes was still there. A cruel mockery. John Legend was still singing, a grotesque soundtrack for the demolition of my life. I got in my truck and sat there, the engine off, just staring at the house I had thought was my home. An hour passed, maybe more. I saw movement. In the window. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Leo practically sprinted out. He didn't even look at me, jumped in his Jeep and peeled out, fleeing like the coward he was. Then Valeria appeared on the porch wearing a bathrobe, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. She just stood there watching me, trembling. I waited until Leo's car was gone. Then I got out, walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture, and went inside. The silence was absolute now, suffocating. She followed me in, closing the door softly. She stood in the middle of the living room, hugging herself, and started to babble excuses. Arthur, I don't know what to say. It just sort of happened. I never meant to hurt you. I cut her off. My voice was flat, empty of all emotion. How long? She went quiet, confused. What? Don't make me repeat it, Valeria, I said, meeting her eyes for the first time. I saw the fear in them. How long? She tried to dodge again. Listen, we need to talk about this. It wasn't planned. My feelings just got confused. How long? This time my voice cracked, a choked shout. It was the only glimpse of the rage boiling beneath the surface. She flinched. Finally, she surrendered. Her voice was a barely audible whisper.
2 years.
2 years. The number hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. 730 days. A flood of now tainted memories washed over me. Every Saturday I'd worked overtime, thinking I was building our future. She was with him. Every time she'd said she was staying late to grade papers, she was with him.
The Christmas
parties, the family dinners, the birthdays, it had all been an elaborate, tour-long lie. And I was the only one who didn't know his lines. Even then, she tried to justify it, sitting on our couch. The one I'd paid for with 3 paychecks because she said it would be perfect for our future family. She told me about their deep intellectual and artistic connection. She said he understood her in a way that my practical engineer's mind never could. And then the final twist of the knife. I do still love you, Arthur, but I'm in love with him. I stood up. The calm I felt was the calm in the eye of a hurricane. You have until sundown to get your things out of my house, I said, not looking at her. You can't do this to me, she shrieked. I need more time. We have to figure this out like adults. Figuring this out ended 2 years ago, Valeria. Now get your things and get out. I walked out of the house, leaving her sobbing. I drove straight to a hardware store and bought the strongest deadbolts they had. By the time I got back, she was gone. She'd left a 5-page handwritten letter on the coffee table. I didn't read it. I just put it in a drawer. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty living room staring at the walls, feeling a void so vast it threatened to swallow me whole. The man who believed in solid structures had just learned the hardest lesson of all. No foundation can withstand the weight of a betrayal like that. The months that followed were a blur of numb rage and back-breaking work. I poured myself into my job, building concrete walls around my own heart. I sold the house at a loss just to be rid of it and moved into a sterile, soulless apartment. Sold the ring and used the money to pay off the last of our shared debts. My only link to that other life was my sister Sophia. She'd call occasionally, her voice laced with guilt, to give me updates I never asked for, but morbidly needed to hear. She told me Valeria had officially moved into our parents' house, into my old bedroom with Leo, and my mother Isabel was ecstatic. According to Sophia, my mother had been the puppet master all along, whispering to Valeria that she was more Leo's type and telling Leo that Valeria understood his sensitive soul. The final breaking point. The moment I knew I'd lost not just a fiancé and a brother, but my entire family, came on Christmas Eve. In our culture, Christmas Eve is sacred. It's about family. My father had called me, his voice placating, soon. It's Christmas Eve. Don't let these problems divide us on a night like this. Your mother is so sad. Like a fool, I went. I walked into the house and the scene that greeted me was a nightmare. There they all were, my parents, Sophia, and on the main couch, holding hands like the king and queen of the prom, were Leo and Valeria. She was wearing a festive red dress, smiling as he whispered in her ear. My mother was looking at them with a stomach-churning adoration. The room went silent when I walked in. I felt like an intruder, the ghost at the feast. My mother stood up. Dabbing a fake tear from her eye, she had a speech prepared. Arthur, I'm so glad you came. This family needs to heal, and healing starts with forgiveness. What Leo and Valeria did wasn't right, but love is complicated, and family must stay together above all else. I looked at my dad, who was nodding like a bobblehead. I looked at Sophia, who was staring at the floor, and I looked at the happy couple on the couch. Valeria had the audacity to give me a small, pitying smile. Leo just looked defiant. Then my mother dropped the bomb. "In fact, tonight is a celebration," she said, clapping her hands together. "We've invited Valeria's parents over. They'll be here any minute." I thought it was a good time to bring the families together, now that Leo and Valeria are thinking of getting married. Getting married? They weren't just stealing my life. They wanted me to be a witness as they rebuilt it for themselves on top of my ruins. They wanted me to sit at their table, pass the turkey, and toast to their happiness. They wanted me to validate their treachery. In that instant, something inside me finally snapped clean in two. I saw them all for what they were. My mother, the manipulator. My father, the coward. And the two of them, the selfish thieves. Without a word, I turned to leave. "Arthur, where are you going?" My mother cried, her voice now laced with real panic. "Can't leave, it's Christmas Eve. Think of the family." I kept walking. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night. I got in my truck and just drove. I ended up at a 24-hour taco stand, a fluorescent-lit place filled with lonely people. I sat on a plastic chair under the buzzing neon lights and ate 5 tacos al pastor. It sounds pathetic, I know, but I swear, sitting there with strangers was 1,000 times better than staying in that house. While I ate, I took out my phone and started making a list, a step-by-step plan for how to disappear. The decision was made. There was no going back. On Christmas morning, while the rest of the city was opening presents, I started to dismantle my life. The list on my phone was my new blueprint. First, the bank. I opened a new account at a completely different institution and transferred every last cent. Second, the phone. My mother was the primary account holder on our family plan, which meant she could see a log of my calls. I went to a competitor, got a new number, a new phone, and a new plan in my name only. It felt like getting a new identity. Third, the digital footprint. I downloaded my important photos, then began the methodical, ruthless purge. Leo blocked, Valeria blocked, my mother blocked, my father blocked, their friends, their relatives, anyone who could act as a spy. I left Sophia unblocked but unfriended her. I created new, sterile profiles under a slightly different name for professional use only. The ghost was being born. The biggest move was my job. I had a good relationship with my old supervisor, Don Miguel, who had since transferred to a bigger project in Querétaro, a city hours away. I called him Don Miguel. It's Arthur. "I need a change of scenery, a big one. Is there a spot for me on your team down there?" "You name the day, son," he said. No questions asked. "We could use you yesterday." The last loose end was the apartment I'd been renting. I still had months left on the lease. I told the landlord a heavily edited version of the story. To my shock, he nodded. "My own brother pulled a fast one on me 30 years ago," he said. "I get it. Break the lease. Just pay 1 month's penalty." Small act of human decency that felt monumental. During all this, my mother kept leaving manipulative voicemails on my old number. "Arturo, running away doesn't solve problems. You have to learn to forgive. It's what God would want." The day I left, I got up at 4 a.m. and loaded the last of my boxes into a moving truck. No note, no goodbyes. I just started driving south, watching Monterey shrink in my rearview mirror. As I got closer to Querétaro, my new phone started buzzing with messages from unknown numbers, aunts, uncles. My mother had discovered my empty apartment and activated the family emergency network, crying about how her son had abandoned them. Then, a friend request on my new anonymous Instagram. The profile name was Issa Glee, my mother trying to be clever. A message immediately followed. "Why did you move without telling us? We are your family. We miss you and need you home. We can get through this together." I pulled over to the side of the highway. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. I typed the most satisfying reply of my life. "You only have one son left. I am no longer part of that family." I hit send, and then, with a firm finger, I pressed block. I arrived at my new empty apartment in Querétaro that night. I lay on the floor, using my jacket as a pillow, and for the first time in months, I slept. A deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep. The ghost had been born. Querétaro was good for me. The city was calmer than Monterey, and without the constant family drama, my mind was clear, focused. I poured myself into work. Within 3 months, they made me a senior project manager. It turns out your productivity skyrockets when you're not constantly dodging emotional daggers. Also found a new outlet for the rage that still simmered. Deep inside, I joined an MMA gym. First, it was just a way to physically exhaust myself so my mind would shut up at night. But it became more. The rhythmic impact of my gloves on the heavy bag was a kind of purge. Every punch was a blow against the memory of their betrayal, against my mother's fake smile, against my own foolishness. I was forging a new kind of armor. Life settled into a predictable, peaceful rhythm. Work, gym, home. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was at peace. Then, about a year after I'd left, my phone rang. An unknown number from Monterey. I hesitated. I should have ignored it. Hello, Arthur. It's me, Aunt Carmen, my mother's sister. Her voice was broken. She was sobbing. Arthur, it's your mother, she choked out. They diagnosed her. They diagnosed her with breast cancer. It's stage 4, son. Terminal. The doctors are giving her 3 months, maybe less. The floor fell out from under me. Cancer. Terminal. She's asking for you, Arthur, my aunt continued. She wants to see you. She wants to make peace. Before, I sat in my truck for an hour after I hung up, staring into space. All the anger, all the cold resolve I had built, it all just crumbled. Yes, she had failed me in the cruelest way imaginable, but she was still my mother, the woman who taught me how to ride a bike, who made me chicken soup when I was sick. I called my boss, booked the first flight to Monterey, and packed a bag. I packed a dark suit just in case. On the plane, I tortured myself. I'd been too hard, too unforgiving. Life was too short. This was the last chance to find some kind of closure. By the time I landed, I had convinced myself I was going to forgive. Her, my Aunt Carmen, picked me up. She seemed nervous, avoiding my eyes. Your mom's at home, she said. She wanted to wait for you there. I walked into the house I grew up in, my heart pounding, bracing myself for the worst. A hospital bed, oxygen tanks, a frail, withered figure. I saw none of that. What I saw was my entire family assembled in the living room. My father, Sophia, Leo, Valeria, and my mother. My mother standing in the middle of the room, looking as healthy as ever. The silence was deafening. Then my mother started to cry, her practiced, manipulative tears. Arthur, my son, she sobbed, holding her arms. Out to me, I had to do it. I had to do something to bring you home. I couldn't stand my family being torn apart. It was all a lie. The rage I'd felt before was a flickering candle compared to this inferno. This was a new level of betrayal, so monstrous it defied comprehension. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just looked at them one by one, and then I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a hollow, broken sound. The laugh of a man who has seen the absolute bottom of human depravity and found his own family living there. You faked cancer, I said, my voice so low they had to lean in to hear. You faked terminal cancer to manipulate me. It was desperate measures. My mother shrieked. A mother does what she has to do to keep her family together. Son, my father, chimed in. Your mother just wants to fix things. It's time to get over it. Leo and Valeria are getting married, and we need to be a family again. I stopped laughing. I looked at them with a coldness that scared them. You know what's funny? Said my voice sharp as glass. On the plane, I actually felt guilty. I was remembering the good times, wondering if I'd been too harsh. But this. I gestured to the room, to all of them. This is a gift. Because now, I know with absolute and total certainty that cutting you out of my life was the single smartest thing I have ever done. I turned and walked to the door. Congratulations, Mom. You just murdered any chance of ever having a relationship. With me again? I walked out of that house, as their shouts followed me. My aunt was waiting in the car, crying for real this time. Turns out my mother had manipulated her too, telling her I was suicidal and needed an intervention. I took an Uber back to the airport, bought a ticket on the next flight out, and in the waiting lounge I blocked my aunt's number. The last bridge had been burned. This time, I was the one holding the match. After the fake cancer incident, I built a fortress around my life, became even more reserved. That stunt had left a deep scar, a final confirmation that I could trust no one who shared my blood. I channeled everything into my work and my MMA training. The gym was my sanctuary, and that's where I met Laura. She was an ER nurse, strong-willed, with a kind smile and eyes that held no malice. We started talking, then grabbing coffee. Slowly, a relationship began to bloom. I was cautious, telling her an edited version of my past. I was scared of her judgment, of her pity, but most of all, I was scared of being vulnerable again. She never pushed. Laura was everything Valeria wasn't: independent, grounded, and fiercely honest. For the first time in a long time, I started to believe I could have a normal life. Christmas rolled around again. Laura's family, who lived in Dallas, invited me to spend the holidays with them. The idea terrified me, but Laura was so warm and insistent that I finally agreed. Her family was wonderfully normal. We spent Christmas morning opening gifts and laughing. It was the kind of genuine family warmth I thought I'd lost forever. That afternoon, Laura's mom mentioned that some old family friends who happened to be visiting were stopping by for dinner. I didn't think anything of it. Around 4 p.m., the doorbell rang. Laura's mom went to open it, and then I heard it. I heard my mother's voice, that sickly, sweet, concerned tone she used when she had an audience. An icy chill shot down my spine. I turned slowly, and there they were, standing in the doorway of my girlfriend's family home in Dallas, Texas. My mother, my father, Sophia, Leo, and Valeria, posed like some grotesque Christmas card. I looked at their faces, and then I looked. At Laura, she wasn't surprised. She was just guilty. Her eyes told me everything she knew. She had planned it. My mother, the master manipulator, had been contacting her for months, weaving a sob story about her poor lost son who was running from his problems and needed a love intervention to heal. Laura, my sweet, well-intentioned Laura, wanting to be the hero who fixed her broken boyfriend, had fallen for it. She gave them the address. She orchestrated my final ambush. My mother started her usual routine. "Arthur, this childishness has to stop. Your reaction has been unacceptable, abandoning your family." "Brother, we've all suffered so much because of this," Leo said, holding up Valeria's hand to show off. A glittering engagement ring suffered. They had suffered. The irony was suffocating. This time, there was no laughter, no shock, just a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. I ignored my family. My eyes were locked on Laura, who was now crying silently. The woman I had placed my fragile trust in had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, siding with my tormentors. I walked over to her. The room went quiet, anticipating an explosion. I leaned in and whispered so only she could hear, "Find your own way home? I'll get my things later." I turned to leave. Chaos erupted. Laura sobbing my name, my father yelling about respect. As I reached the door, my mother grabbed my arm. "Don't you dare turn your back on us. I raised you better than this. You carry our name. You have a legacy." I stopped. I looked at her, not with hate, but with infinite pity. "You're mistaken," I said, my voice quiet and final. "I had my last name legally changed months ago. Your legacy is no longer mine." Her face crumbled. She staggered back and collapsed into a chair, wailing about tradition and family honor. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. That long, silent drive back to Querétaro was the final nail in the coffin of my old life. The next morning, I packed all of Laura's things into a box and left it on her doorstep. The last tie was definitively, irrevocably cut. The years that followed were years of silent construction. I built my career, my wealth, and an impregnable fortress around myself. As Arturo Reyes, my grandmother's surname, I became a new man. About 3 years after the Dallas debacle, my company won a massive urban renewal contract in Monterey. It involved demolishing a series of old bank foreclosed properties. As my boss showed me the list of addresses, my heart stopped. It was the address of the house I grew up in. My parents had lost it. My mother, desperate to give Leo and Valeria the wedding of their dreams, had remortgaged the house into oblivion. When my father discovered the extent of the debt, it was too late. The bank took everything. I'll personally oversee that lot, I told my boss. The day of the demolition, I arrived early. The house looked derelict, the garden overgrown with weeds. I felt a strange detachment. I stood at a safe distance, arms crossed, and watched. The giant excavator lifted its arm, and with a deafening crash, the first wall came down. Then another, the living room where my mother held court, the kitchen of fake family dinners. All of it turned to dust and rubble. Halfway through, my mother appeared. She stood behind the safety tape, her face a mask of horror. She looked older, worn down by the weight of her own schemes. Our eyes met across the dust cloud. She was waiting for a reaction. I gave her nothing. I was just a supervisor doing his job. The roof collapsed. Leo's room, my old room, the bedroom where I'd been betrayed, all of it was reduced to a pile of debris. When the last wall fell, I turned and walked to my truck without looking back. As I drove away, I saw her in my rearview mirror, a small, solitary figure standing before the ruins of the life she herself had burned to the ground. I felt no satisfaction, no pity. I felt only a deep, profound relief. The last ghost had been exorcised. The ground was finally clear to build something. New, true justice, I learned, isn't vengeful. It's the slow, quiet, inevitable result of your own choices. I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma found their address all on its own. Sophia, who had started therapy and apologized for her cowardice, gave me the updates. Leo and Valeria's dream marriage imploded in less than 6 months. Valeria got bored and had an affair with Leo's best man. She got pregnant with the best man's child. Leo, the sensitive artist, became a bitter drunk. He now lives in the basement of the depressing apartment my mother rents, writing angsty songs about betrayal, the irony completely lost on him. My parents divorced. My father, finally seeing the full scope of my mother's financial deception, packed his bags and left. He started therapy, stopped being a shadow, and began to live his own life. My mother, Isabel, was left alone with no house, no husband, and a failed adult son in her basement. For the first time in her life, she had. To get a real job, she works as a greeter at Walmart. The woman obsessed with status and legacy now wears a blue vest and says, "Welcome." I heard all of this in silence. I expected to feel a surge of vengeful joy, but I felt nothing of the sort. Just an overwhelming sense of relief that I had gotten out. They weren't my monsters anymore. They were just broken people consumed by their own fire, and I was finally free. In the calm after the storm, I met Mariana. It was in the produce section of the supermarket, both of us reaching for the last good avocado. We laughed. It was that simple. She's an architect, brilliant, funny, and honest to the core. When things got serious, I told her everything, the full, unedited story. When I finished, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with respect. "You built an entire life from the rubble," she said, taking my hand. "You're the strongest man I know, Arturo Reyes." I knew then that I was safe. We moved in together. Our house is a home filled with light and laughter. And one Sunday afternoon, Mariana put my hand on her belly. "We're going to need an extra room," she said with a smile that lit up the universe. "I'm going to be a father." The news somehow reached my mother. A few weeks ago, a package arrived. It was filled with my old baby clothes and a 10-page letter. I saw the first few lines, something about family legacy and second chances. I kept the clothes. They are part of my story. The letter went unread into the paper shredder. Last month, my father called. His voice was old and tired, but clear. "Arthur, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was a coward. Should have defended you. I failed as a father. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just needed you to know. And we spoke for a few minutes. I promised nothing, but I listened. Man finally taking responsibility. Tonight, Mariana is sleeping beside me. I put my hand on her belly and feel a tiny kick, a hello from the future. I look around our home at the life I have built. I feel no anger, no hate, only a deep, immense peace. I broke the cycle for me, for her, and for the future that this time is being built on solid rock. On the strongest foundations of all, love, respect, and truth.